Guys, it's no secret that I am not a big fan of the short-term rental as a business model here in the Boise metro area. And in today's video, I'm going to talk about how vacancy rates in that space are destroying ROI for investors, how hidden costs are eating into cash flow, and how community pushback could potentially make that business model irrelevant in the future here in the Boise metro area. If you have a rental and you're trying to convert from short-term to long-term, or you own a primary and you're considering renting it out long-term for income, I've got a link in the description below for a free rent assessment on your home, and we'd love to help. But let's dive into this video. Okay, reason number one, vacancy. Unpredictable vacancies kill investment strategy. And it's as simple as that, guys. I manage quite a few doors in the single family long-term space. And any one of my owners will tell you it's better to have a tenant than a few more $100 a month. And let's talk about why that is. In the Boise metro area, the cost of your property, mortgage, taxes, and insurance can easily exceed $2,000 a month. In fact, if you've bought within the last 3 years, you're probably pushing $2,500, $2,600, $2,700 a month for those costs. And if you divide 2,000 for the simplicity of this presentation, we'll divide 2,000 across a 30-day month. That's a $66 a day cost to hold that property. And for every day you don't have somebody in place, it's costing you $66.60. So we're not reaching for aggressive rent right now. We're keeping tenants, especially in this economy. According to Rabu.com, over the next 30 days in Boise, the percentage of nights reserved is only 51%. That leaves a 49% vacancy rate in the single family short-term rental space. That's insane. 49%. All right. Let's take that a step further. They go on to break down revenue per available night, which appears to be the average daily rate time divided by occupancy at 51%. And that gives you a rent yield of $72 per day. $72 per day. If you take into the account that $66 a day is your cost and you're making 72, at the end of a month, your cash flow is $162 per month. That's in the short-term rental space. And vacancy is the variable there, guys. Their nightly rates are looking like $140 a night. However, when you take your 49% vacancy rate into account, you're really lucky to come out at $72 a day for that rental. Now, $162 of cash flow is peanuts considering the cost of these properties. And this is before we calculate expenses, and that's what I'll touch on in the next section. In contrast, according to Zillow, the average rent for a 3-bedroom single-family home in the Boise area is $2,200 a month, which actually gives you a $38 a month advantage going long-term versus short-term. So think about that. Everybody out there is choosing to go the short-term rate, or I should say everybody out there who is choosing to go the short-term rate is going for bigger returns. And what we're seeing here in Boise is not only is it an unstable business model, the returns are less from a cash flow perspective on predictable income produced. So the beautiful thing about the long-term rental space is you get a 6 to 12 month lease in place. And here in Idaho, the tenant is responsible for the entirety of that lease. So should they decide to leave early, they are still required to pay rent until you replace them, which really wormholes the vacancy moment where, hey, we got a 12-month lease signed. We're not worrying about vacancy for 12 months. Peace of mind alone is worth a lot of money, guys. And as we've just seen, the returns are actually better to be able to sleep at night. So at the end of the day, vacancies do happen, but not on a whim in the long-term space. And we're not at the mercy of microeconomic trends that are happening in the short-term / hospitality space in today's economy. All right, number 2 reason, costs. Okay, all rentals have cost and risk. Let's get that out of the way, right? But there's quite a few extra costs in the short-term space, and let's touch on a few of those. First of all, utilities. Short-term renters expect utilities to be included in the value of rent. We've got internet at $100+ a month. We've got gas. Average cost in Idaho is about $38. I put 40 here for easy math, $40 a month. Electricity on average, probably in the summertime with AC running, you're looking at 100 plus. In the winter, it gets a little lower because gas picks up the heat. So we'll say average of $90 a month. Sewer, water, trash, those are often paid together depending on which city you're in out here. They do break them out in certain areas, but we can average that at about $70 a month in cost. And then an HOA, some people have them, some people don't have them. Boise is a little bit more sporadic in where there are and aren't HOAs. If you're out in Meridian, it's a little bit more predictable. However, we'll give it an estimate of $40 a month. That's about right. That's a pretty cheap community cost. And then at the same time, they can get more expensive if there's pools, etc. Anyway, $40 a month. Landscaping maintenance, mowing, fertilizer, weeding, seasonal cleanup, snow removal. These are all things you cannot count on short-term tenants to take care of. And I would say if we broke that cost, it's aggressive 6-month cost broken out over 12 months, looks like about $90 a month. That's to have your lawn mowed, fertilized, weeded, seasonal cleanup, and snow removal. Let's call it $90 a month. All right, management fees. There are a ton of moving parts in the short-term rental business, and the customer's experience is so important, guys, that you can't really cut corners in that space. Some of you might be self-managing. I don't recommend that, but especially in the short-term space, it can be a lot of touches. It can feel like a full-time job. While you may be considering managing yourself, again, I don't recommend buying a home that doesn't produce enough income to pay for professional management. Now, why is that? Because if you hate it, which a lot of people find out they do, or you have no choice but to hand it over to somebody else. If the numbers didn't work going in, you are now underwater on that rental. So guys, if you are considering self-managing, I would still be breaking my numbers down with professional management included. So what does that cost? Okay, great question. Management fees for the short-term rental space can be between 20 and 35%. Guys, my guess is if you're paying 20, you've got somebody who's not taking care of your property. And if you're paying 35%, you may be paying too much. But considering the size of the job, I think it's most likely justified to ask for that much money. We manage a handful of short-term rentals and a couple of furnished rentals in the midterm space, and it's a ton of work. So any manager who gets involved needs to supplement their time. So let's break this management fee down. All right, first of all, the average collection on Airbnb across Boise is $2,150 a month, and that's seasonally adjusted. So you'll have months where you're winning, then you'll have months where you're losing, and it averages out to be making about $2,150 a month. And that's not a huge return, guys, especially considering the vacancy variable. So you're collecting $2,150 a month on average, times 25% for a conservative management estimate. That's $537 a month goes to the management team, leaving you with $1,612.50. Now, depending on when you bought your home out here, as I mentioned earlier, that may be plenty of money to cover your baseline cost. If you're 5 to 6 years purchased out here, you're probably winning with that number. But what happens when we add in the other costs? Okay, you got your $1,612.50. So let's take out internet. Let's take out landscaping. Let's take out electricity. Let's take out water, sewer, trash. Let's take out gas and then HOA. That's leaving you with $1,182.50. That's not sounding great, guys. Oh yeah, and your mortgage payment. So let's take your mortgage payment out. You're at negative $817.50 to own a short-term rental here in the Boise area. Does that sound like winning, guys? And to touch on that management fee piece again, you can average about 8% of collected rents in the long-term space. And considering you're getting another $50 a month and then you're paying less in management fees, think about that for a second. You are increasing fees across the board because utilities, landscaping, all that stuff is tenant responsibility in the long-term space. So you're taking on a considerable amount of cost and then you're not recouping it with rent. And that's really the message in this section, guys, is the cost can kill you in the short-term space. Oh yeah, and last but not least, furnishings. And anybody out there who's spoken to me about the short-term space, They know I don't like it, and I always point to furnishings because, guys, as an investor and as your partner in investing in this area, my job is to protect your capital so that you can stretch it across more properties for more leveraged returns. And if that's true, I cannot stand furnishings. Look at this. 15 to $20,000 is predictably what it costs to furnish a home. Now, the size of the home needs to be taken into account and the quality of the furnishings, obviously. But you're in the hospitality space, and I've seen furnished rentals that didn't take that part of it seriously. And at the end of the day, it weighs on the customer's experience, and then the review's not great, right? So you could easily spend more than $20,000 to furnish a house because you need pots and pans and knives and spoons and forks and sheets and all the stuff. It can get very capital intensive, right? And furniture and furnishings lose value very quickly, guys. I did some research, so I wasn't shooting from the hip on these numbers, but it says 20% loss the first year. So if you spent $20,000 on furnishings in the first year, you lost 20% of that investment. And then between 5 and 10% loss every year after that. But I'll tell you what, guys, in my experience, furniture loses value instantly, and especially when you put it into a rental. So I've brought my stuff down to a consignment shop. They're only going to give me 50% of the sale, and they're going to discount it to move it. The last couch I had sold, I think I made $160 on an $800 investment in the course of 1 year. So furnishings, man, it's a very fast loss in that space. Okay, and let's break down the numbers a little further. For a conservative number, let's say you lose 30% in your first 2 years. That's based on the research, right? Based on your previous cost estimate, that's between $4,500 and $6,000 lost immediately. That's within 2 years. And to be clear, I understand you need to spend money to make money, but this doesn't shake out unless you can earn an additional $187 to $250 per month. And that's just to break even on the furniture loss. So at the end of the day, we're losing money. And when you add this back to the other number, all right, we were losing to utilities and the mortgage based on vacancy rate. Now we throw furnishings in here. You're losing close to $1,000 a month, and it could be worse than that, guys. We're taking the average vacancy. Is some guy out there vacant 70% of the time? I'm sure he is. And he's probably calling us to turn it into a long-term rental because we're still moving pretty fast in that space out here. The third reason, and I think this one's probably the most important, communities don't like the short-term rental business. They just don't like it, guys. We got to face that fact. If I'm in a neighborhood and somebody shows up for the weekend and parties and goes, there's no real community experience. Then nobody wants that, so to speak. And in fact, there are drastic measures being taken as we speak to ban them from neighborhoods and in some cases entire cities. Sounds crazy, right? Well, check out what a quick Google search brings up. Okay, one article, how Airbnbs could affect your local housing market. How Airbnb bans, excuse me, they're using the word ban, meaning people are saying no to this business model. Top cities where Airbnb is legal or illegal. They're making it illegal. Can a city ban an Airbnb? Why short-term rental services is facing legal challenges. There's a headwind, guys, and I think it's going to get worse. End of Airbnb in New York. Now, when I saw this, I was very surprised. Of all the places you would expect to be able to get an Airbnb and need an Airbnb, it's New York. But I think what we're seeing happening here is as less people have disposable income for the hospitality space, the actual hotels are pushing back on Airbnb and the government's getting involved. So they're saying, hey, no more Airbnbs. And check that article out because that's a very important one here. Let's talk about in Idaho. Boise City Council greenlights an ordinance requiring short-term rental licenses. It starts with a license. It ends with a drastic regulation. So they're now putting things in place where you have to meet these requirements to be a licensed Airbnb, and they're going to start limiting the number of Airbnbs allowed in the area. So be very careful. Many HOAs also are limiting owners to long-term lease agreements in their neighborhood as rentals. So I know my neighborhood says, my HOA says 6 months or more, no less. I couldn't even take advantage of a furnished rental in the midterm traveling nurse space at a 3-term lease agreement where I am. So more and more cities and communities are rolling out regulations against the Airbnb. And I'm picking on Airbnb, but the short-term rental as a business model. And guys, that really wraps it today. I hope that was useful to you. If you're considering taking your short-term rental that isn't working and bringing it into the long-term space, I got you back. I'll put a link down in the description below, which should help you get a free rent assessment on your property. And I'm here to help, guys. I'll talk about real estate all day long. So I'll also put my phone number down below. Shoot me a text message. Let's set up a phone call. And I wish you the best of luck in your investment here in Boise. I'll talk to you soon.